We'll be modifying chapter 4, exercise 3, the ice cream shop. Okay, and so you guys could kind of name this whatever you wanted. So this is the one that you are going to be modifying, the ice cream shop. And you are going to be storing the cone size, the flavor, and the price in arrays instead of variables. So the cone size will need to go into a character array, or it could be a string array. And that just depends on what you want them to enter. If you want them to enter an S for small, okay, that's a character. If you want them to enter the word small, that is a string. Okay, so you choose, what you want them to do and what you are going to store. The cone price should be stored in a double array, and the ice cream flavors should be stored in a string array. And for 2 scoops, you can have 2 different flavors. For 3 scoops, you can have 3 different flavors. So you will be separating the flavors by using a space or a new line escape sequence. And I will show you what that looks like. Once the cones have been made, you will loop through the arrays, print a summary of the order, and you will also tally up the total amount the customer should pay, and you will display that amount to them. So here are the modifications you need to make to the program. After you prompt the user to enter the number of ice cream cones, which you should already be doing, then you are going to be using that number as a size for each array, and you have 3 arrays. So you're going to create the character or string cone size array. You'll be creating the string flavor array and the double price array. So here is a little example. This code should be in there already. How many cones are you purchasing today? You read the value in, and then this is where you will be creating all 3 arrays. And I've given you an example of what you could do for cone size. And you have the option of using character or string here. Okay, this is using character. Once you've created all 3 arrays, you're going to remove the variables that currently exist for the cone size, flavor 1, 2, and 3. Now, if you don't want to remove code, you can certainly comment it out. Just put 2 slashes in front, and that will comment it out. Or you can delete it. That, again, is up to you. You are going to want to keep the for loop that is currently processing the cones. Okay, so inside the for loop is where we've been asking them for the flavors they want based on their size. So you're going to be keeping that for loop. But the variable that you are initializing to 0 in the for loop is going to be what you index, what you use as the index into your arrays. So here I've got integer I set I to 0. So I becomes my index. And in this for loop, we are putting data into our arrays. Then within the for loop, you should be checking for the size cone that they would like. So you are going to need to change the variable you are storing the cone size in to use the array. So I've got some old code. I've got old code, not old cone. Old code here. So this is what you should have, or something similar. What size cone do you want? We read it from the console and we store the cone size. Okay, so this is going to change. So here is what size cone do you want? This is assuming character. And if you want to use string, then it's just small, comma, medium, comma, large. Just depends, on how you want to set this up. So if it's string, that's pretty straightforward. You'll just have cone size with the index equals console.read line. If it is a single character, that gets a little more complicated. because we have to convert it to a character. And then you'll notice that I'm also converting it to lowercase so that when I check the cone size, I only have to look for lowercase letters. Okay, so you can either store it as a string or a character. A little more work is involved in storing as a character. So here is the while loop. And you can see I am checking the character and I am making sure that the user has entered an S, M, or L. So basically how this reads is the cone size that we, just put the value in. If that is not equal to S, and it is not equal to an M, and it is not equal to an L, we have a problem because all they were supposed to type is S, M, or L. And so if it's not equal to any of those, they keyed in the wrong letter. So we are going to display an error message, and then we are going to read in the character again. And we're literally going to stay in this loop until they type the correct letter. And so you can do the same thing with small, medium, and large, all spelled out. You just want to make sure that, yes, they have entered the correct size. And for those of you who have wanted to implement some validation early, for those of you that are anxious to get into that, we are getting into this in chapter 7. So kind of gradually moving you towards validation. That's really not what I want you to be concerned about right now. So at this point, we should have the cone size. Next thing we need to do is figure out how many or what flavors they want based on the size of cone. So it's pretty straightforward for small because they only get one flavor. So we are going to do a switch. And right now we have a switch, but the variable that we are using is not the array. So we are going to change the switch variable to the cone size array. And then here's an example of the old and the new code. And then for a small cone, okay, and that's my old code and this is my new code. For my small cone, we just need one flavor. So what flavor would you like? Here we're reading it into a variable, kind of the same thing, but we are reading it directly into the array. Up here, we're adding to a grand total. Here, we are just putting the price into our price array. Okay, so very similar process. For the medium and large, we do need a little bit more work, and there is a lot of different ways to do this. So what I'm giving you is the more efficient method. So the more efficient method for a medium or a large is to do a loop and have them enter all the flavors. So this is for a medium. So for a medium, we know it's going to be 2 different flavors or potentially 2 different flavors. And so the prompt is enter flavor number. We're going to add 1 to that because the first time through, I or N in this case is 0. So we don't want to say enter flavor 0 because it sounds like they're not going to get a flavor. So we want to say enter flavor 1. Okay, and they're going to type it in. And you can either prefix whatever they type with a space, and that will keep multiple flavors separate, or you can prefix it with the new line escape character, which will put each flavor on its own line. And that is, again, totally up to you. But we're going to add I'm adding the new line and I'm reading in their flavor string and I'm storing it here. Okay. And then we're going to come up here. So now N is going to equal 1. It's going to say enter flavor number 2. And again, we're putting in the new line and reading in whatever flavor they want. and we're storing it all in the same element. Okay, so if they had wanted, let's say chocolate chip, it's going to look like this. And let's say they wanted chocolate after that. That is how it would look. But when we go to print this out, obviously this doesn't print. It's going to basically do a carriage return. So chocolate chip goes on one line and then chocolate will go on the next. After we get done with the for loop, then we are going to put the price of the medium cone into the price array. Okay, and that is part of the reason I'm using a different index number here. And that is strictly for this little loop. This index number is for the price array. It is for the flavor array, and it is for the cone size. Okay, and so we've actually got two different index numbers going. We've got one for the arrays where we're storing everything, and then we've got another one here for looping. That is why I made this a different variable. Okay, so pay attention to that. And when you do case L or case large, it's going to be the exact same thing, but you're going to have to loop 3 times, and the price is a little bit more. I think it's $3.50. Now, once all the data has gotten entered into the cone, into the cones, then you are going to need to print out a summary of the order. And so you're going to need another loop. And you'll probably end up using a for loop because you've got 3 different arrays that you are going to be accessing. And this is what the output looks like. So that's the entry. So here is the order summary. So I've got that printing out, and then this is coming from this cone size array. This is coming from the flavor array. This is coming from the price array. And then I'm getting the heading, and then I'm retrieving from those different arrays again. Do the same thing down here. Now, inside these for loops that are retrieving the data and printing, I am also calculating a grand total. Okay, so right above that for loop, I create the grand total variable. And then inside the for loop, we are accessing price. And so right below where I print price out, I am adding that price into the grand total. So that when I'm done processing this loop, I can come down here and display the message about what the total cost is. So to help you out with this processing, I will quick show you what that could probably look like. To give you a little idea of what the bottom of this thing might look like. Here is where I'm printing everything out. So everything above here is, the switch. In fact, if you pause, you can see this is my for loop. Here is the end of my switch. And after each pass through, I basically tell them their cone is done. And then here's where I am printing the summary. And for the cone size, you don't want to display S, M, or L. So if you stored it as a string, great, because you can literally just do cone size and then whatever your subscript is. I chose the word done for this subscript because you don't have to do a single letter. So you can use any variable you want as long as you've set it to 0 and you increase it by 1. So I'm using the word done. And so if you stored a string there, great. If you didn't, then you'll probably need to do a static method. So I created a little method called get size. And you can see I am sending it a character. So I'm sending it the character that is in the array. I'm only sending it the one element. So when we come down here, you can see that I am bringing a single character in. Okay, I'm not passing the whole array. I'm just passing the one element. Okay, and so that element is going to be an S, M, or it's going to be an L. So here I've got a string cone size that I'm going to be returning. And then I'm just checking, is cone an S? And if it is, the cone size is small. Is the cone an M? In which case cone size is medium. And if it's not an S or an M, I assume it is large. And that is what I set cone size to. And then I retrieve that or return that text to this location where it will print out small, medium, or large. Okay, so if you chose to have character for the cone size, you will need to do something similar. If you chose to use string for cone size, then you are good. You don't need a method, you just print it out. Okay, and you'll print out flavor and price. And I'm kind of using that short format on price here. And then adding to your grand total. And then after you're done with this loop, then you will print out what that grand total is. So that is the assignment.